Alrighty guys, so here's what you're gonna get. Obviously, I'm gonna talk about why I'm quitting my job as a doctor of physical therapy, the process I went through by slow quitting, and what's at stake, including how much I make on this YouTube channel, and I'm gonna do this by showing you what's inside my journals. Whether you're thinking of quitting your job or making a big life change, I'm pretty sure there's something in this video for you. Dude, my hands are sweating so bad talking about this. Become another person. Fuck this, I'm out. Peace out, bitches. Why the hell am I crying? Shit, this was not a part of the plan. So it turns out, according to these two journals, I have been wanting to quit my job since before I even started treating. And then while I was working, I was one of those people that watched a bunch of I quit videos during my lunch hour and daydreamed about that being me. And those videos were super inspirational and all, but I had no idea how I was actually gonna quit my full-time job with no other income and $150,000 of student loans. But then I read something in a book, and then I used that in my journal to guide me through what I'm calling the art of slow quitting. I didn't think I was gonna make an I quit video until after I had already quit, which is just like a few days from now at the end of this month, but coincidentally, after looking back in my journals, during the same exact time this year, but last year, and 2 years exactly before that, I journaled a bunch of stuff about quitting my job, and I'll explain why I wanted to quit so badly later on in the video, but I actually started my very first journal in the month of February, and at that time I had no intention of using it for reflection. There was one single entry that I put in there that just blows my mind to this day when I read it. But before I start flipping through these journals and all that, I need to give you guys more context around the nature of my profession. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, as I mentioned earlier, and I spend a lot of time with patients, arguably one of the most in healthcare. I know like people's cat names and how much medication they're on for depression and anxiety, and when I started, I just wanted to help people have fun and make money doing it. What I didn't realize is how diligent you need to be to protect your mental health to avoid burning out. Hence why my journal started filling up with more and more self-helpy, reflection-y type entries as my career went along. And honestly, this could be done for really any job. One of the most attractive things though about my profession is that you can choose your own path within the career. You can like work with kids or focus on sports, be in a hospital, or start a YouTube channel. But one of the least attractive things is the debt to income ratio and the potential for the amount of work that you have to take home. And then there's also the potential of chronic fatigue and stress that comes from tending to people's physical and emotional pain on a seemingly endless cycle with little time for yourself. But just to be clear, I'm not quitting this job out of anger or burnout. I'm quitting because journaling has given me all the evidence I need to move on to something much bigger and better. Alright, I'm going to start by flipping through the February entries of last year's journal and then refer to that one entry I mentioned in here for a full circle moment. This is a continuation of my lucky diary from the previous month. I feel like a broken record talking about this, but put quite simply, every day for the last year, I've written at least one thing that I'm grateful for. This has been absolutely critical to shaping my identity and mindset to muster up the courage to slowly quit my job. And ironically, tons of the things that I mention in here are actually directly related to my job. Practicing gratitude has had so much positive evidence behind it, and if you're considering picking up journaling for the first time, I think this is one of the best and easiest ways to start if you're wanting to make a positive change in your life. And whether you have a journal or not, you can start by leaving a comment on something you're grateful for. This page is on exercise ideas. At the time of writing this entry, I only took one thing away from this: putting seeds in my smoothie, which has nothing to do with exercise. I've come a long way in my workout journey since this entry, and I'll share this in another video, but it's worth mentioning that taking charge of my health was also a critical part in the process of slow quitting. When I knew that I was eventually gonna quit my job, I didn't want to leave out of frustration and be all like, "Fuck this, I'm out! Peace out, bitches!" Damn! I wanted to increase my chances of moving forward with my life and not laterally. And most importantly, I didn't want to regret leaving because I made a really hasty and emotional decision. Practicing gratitude and exercising regularly contributed a whole lot to the mental clarity that I wanted to have to leave a stable job with good income and student loan debt to go off and do my own thing. And no, at the time of this video, I am not making anywhere close to a sustainable income off of YouTube. In fact, it's just enough to pay for the stickers that I've been selling, and I'll prove this later. Alright, so in this book by Ryder Carroll, he gives an example of two people who both want to quit their jobs and teach yoga in like foreign countries. One person flat out just quit their job, booked a trip to some tropical place, and started teaching yoga, only to realize that teaching yoga took the fun out of everything, which led her straight back to her desk job. Experiencing something like this was a huge fear of mine. The other person started small by teaching classes on weekends, used vacations to test out teaching for longer periods, and worked out the kinks as she went along and slowly transitioned to a completely different life. I always knew that ripping the band-aid off was not for me, and I had way too much at stake to completely cut off my income and pursue something that was basically just a fun hobby at the time. Rather than making an abrupt, emotional decision to quit, slow quitting involves a deliberate process of preparation, self-reflection, and growth. It's also not about quitting to escape, and rather just quitting on your own, good terms with a clear understanding of why you're moving on.
I'm always in it for the long run. I respect people who's in it for the long run and who make what they like.
I really love this quote because it has everything to do with where I'm at right now in terms of quitting my job. I realize that in order for me to accomplish almost any of my almost delusional goals, I gotta be in it for the long run, and I've learned that the only way to make this sustainable is if I'm proud of the stuff that I'm creating. Damn, my hands are so sweaty. Gotta get my hand sweat rag. This next part here reminds me that something else about my profession is that you have the opportunity to meet and get to know amazing people. My mom once told me that she believed I was in this career to meet the right people to help me do whatever it is I really want to do. Long story short, one of my former patients became my life coach, and I've been working with her for almost 2 years now, which I finally disclosed in a previous video. I typically don't take a lot of notes during our calls, but this call took place just a few months after I had dragged myself out of an episode of burnout, cut down to a 32-hour work week, and I was working my way back into being able to say, I enjoy what I do. But in order to say that, I kind of suspected that it would require more of doing what I had just did, cutting my hours in the clinic to spend more time on my personal goals. So at the end of this call, she asked me, what would 20 hours a week look like? Present day me can tell you that I ended up loving both my job more and doing this more, but I knew this still wasn't going to be the right path. This page is one of my favorite pages in here. Outside of the clinic, I knew I wanted the same thing as when I started working, to help people, have fun, and make money doing it. I took a good look at the productivity and self-help people that I either followed or hear a lot about and realized they're all pretty similar on the surface. All male and mostly white tea. Now I understand there's a lot of other people who touch on self-help outside of this demographic, but it just made me realize I want to be like these people, but for people like me. Like, there's an audience for just me. One of the fastest ways for me to develop a strong rapport with a patient is by relating to them about the stuff that they like. Even if it seems like there's nothing in the world that we could possibly have in common, I always manage to find one thing we can both relate to, because sometimes that's all it takes to win them over and be comfortable trusting me. I figured if this works in person, it should work on the internet, right? People have to choose to click on your video, choose to subscribe, and choose to watch the video to the end. At work, A lot of these people show up and feel like they don't have a choice. They're in pain, they need help, and I have the knowledge and the skills to provide the answers. Patients who have randomly ended up in my care have said the nicest things about me and written me cards and thanked me for everything I've done to get them back to normal. This always feels like pretty dang good, but for some reason, nothing could compare to the feeling of receiving heartfelt emails, comments, and handwritten letters in the mail from strangers whose lives have changed after choosing what I have to offer. Further along my slow quitting journey, I wrote down some comments that predicted this channel would blow up, and then started sorting out my goals. Now, don't judge me. At the time of writing these goals, I was a goal-making noob. I've since made an entire video on how I go about making goals, and this has been yet another component that has helped with slow quitting. But what's cool about all of these goals is that they're still really relevant. I've just gotten much better at executing on them by being much more intentional when I write them. This entire spread is a goal setting exercise that came out of this same book. You write out all of your goals and put them in a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 timeline, which goes from years to months to weeks to days down to the hour. Not perfect for me, but it was a good starting place because I never had really written out my goals until last year. The next exercise is what's called a sprint. You list your long-term goal and start listing out actionable items that would require this to become a reality. Just thinking about this and analyzing how you feel might reveal a lot of useful information before doing anything. I remember being really stressed and scared, but at the same time also really excited about what the future could be. After writing in your sprint actions, you answer these questions. What about this goal sparked my curiosity? What motivated me to invest my time and energy here? What am I trying to accomplish? What will it require? And what is a definition of success with this goal? Of everything written here, I am so glad that I recognized I needed 2 things as a requirement to quit, and present day me has finally realized that it was never about the money. And there was a point in time where I believed this decision to quit was 100% dependent on that. This YouTube contract used to be framed and displayed on my gallery wall to help me build consistency. It was a form of negative motivation where if I didn't make a video every 2 weeks, I'd have to fork over $700 to Abby. This has been replaced with my first $100 from YouTube, which not only symbolizes humble beginnings, but also letting go of my scarcity mindset with money in order to achieve my goals. Even though money has a lot to do with my decision to quit, the 2 requirements that had everything to do with it was a strong resistance from self-doubt and self-trust. This is how much money I'm currently making off of YouTube, and my savings isn't popping either, so you can probably see why these 2 things are so important. This leads me to the one journaling exercise that was the beginning of slow quitting my job as a physical therapist before I even started. The fear setting exercise. 3 years ago, before I even had this job, I wrote out the answers to these questions, and then I did it again last year. And as I look back at all of my answers, it made me realize that it was the best thing for me to slowly quit my job at the same pace that I was becoming a different person. For me personally, if I had quit while I was in the middle of burnout and hating every single day going into the clinic, I wouldn't have cultivated the mindset that it requires to be an entrepreneur. I wouldn't have been mentally stable enough to enter a pretty risky and volatile path, and I wouldn't have known what I was really getting myself into. I'm sure that if I had quit while I was really burnt out, I would have figured it out, but probably at the expense of my happiness and well-being, and most importantly, probably at the expense of doing this. I didn't want to wind up hating something that I love, which is learning and sharing it with other people. Slow quitting allowed me to enjoy the process of an often dramatic and very stressful life change. Over the course of 3 years, I went from 40 hours to 32 hours to 20 hours, and now I'm finally quitting. My coworkers have been super supportive, my patients have been super supportive, my parents, Toby, and of course my wife, Abby. But the thing about these questions is that they get you to think about how you can support you. It was completely unintentional that I answered these questions in the same month that I'm quitting, and to this moment, it blows my mind. Like, it's just so freaking crazy to me. If you're wanting to quit your job or make any kind of life change and you're scared to even think about it, these questions might just give you the evidence you need to take the first small step. The reason I'm quitting my job is because I truly, deeply believe that I can have a much bigger impact on the internet by helping the same types of people that I work with in the clinic. People that just want to live healthier and happier lives. But that's not even half the reason why. The real reason is actually pretty selfish. It's also because I want to create the life that allows me to focus on my goals and nobody else's. I don't remember who said it, but there's some saying that goes like, if you don't choose what you want for yourself, someone will choose for you. I've had several jobs since becoming a doctor, and I can safely say that each time I quit, I always moved on to something bigger and better. But the hardest jobs to leave were the ones where I felt I had invested the most time, money, effort, while having a positive impact. Why the hell am I crying? Okay. Yeah, that's probably why it took me 3 years to get here. Yeah, so these last few pages for the rest of the month, and honestly the rest of this journal, shit. Yeah, the last few pages in this journal for the month and for the rest of this journal are literally just the plans and actions that slowly transformed my identity to build up to this moment right now that's gonna lead me to something bigger and better than what I was doing. Shit, this was not a part of the plan. Anyway, if you want to see what else is in here, or in here, whatever, consider subscribing and join my newsletter where I talk about how to make journaling do what it did for me. Damn. Shit. TTYL. Now I'm like the rest of those people that cry on the internet.